World leaders have also been reacting to the death of Pope Francis, the pontiff's passing being described by some as a big loss to the Catholic faithful and the Christian world. He's been praised for his compassion for the poor and strong ethical and moral conviction. Francis, who was 88 years old, had suffered a serious bout of double pneumonia this year, but his death has still been described as a shock after he was seen just yesterday being driven around St. Peter's Square in an open-air popemobile where he greeted the cheering faithful on Easter Sunday. Let's talk more then about the death of the Pope. Now bring in retired Bishop of the Ethiopian Episcopal Church, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana. A very good evening to you, sir. Good to have your time on the SABC. So the death of the Pope then, clearly a big loss for Roman Catholics around the world. Is it as big a loss for the Christian community as a whole?
It's a big loss for everyone. It's a big loss for humanity because Pope Francis, just from the day he began, he indicated very clearly that he's a pope for the world, not just for Roman Catholics. And I think that his papacy has demonstrated that throughout his time, which, as it turns out, was not going to be that long. But he, you know, he was a man. I mean, I don't want to repeat everything that everyone has said about his care for his humility and his commitment to the poor, the downtrodden, and the needy. All of those things are true. But I want to say that he, in my view, was a typical Latin American priest because liberation theology was uh, developed in Latin America, even though he was not known as a liberation theologian himself in terms of his writings at the time when others were all over the place. But certainly his attitude to life, his messaging was exactly in keeping with the spirit of liberation theology that Latin America has always been known for. Secondly, he he came into the Vatican with a simplicity that was going to change the way in which the Pope is perceived, both within the Catholic Church and outside of the Catholic Church. That he then became somebody who you can almost like your ordinary uncle that you can run into. That's how he came across to everyone. And whether it was within the Vatican or outside the Vatican. And so it is therefore a great loss for the world, not just for the Catholic Church.
So accessibility is what you're referring to there, Bishop Mpumlwana. How important is it for the clergy, the leaders of the church, to be accessible, to be among the faithful?
Pope Francis uh, modeled that approach. This may or may not be true, but I'm told on the day after he was elected, he refused to go into the special lift that was designed for the Pope so that he can be with everyone else. And he moved away from the residence, the palatial residence that was designed for the Pope, and rather chose a much more modest residence for himself. And that again says accessible, accessible, accessible. And when he was at visiting Jerusalem, and he was staying at a Catholic center in Jerusalem. The room that he occupied was a regular small hotel room. And that's the kind of, it therefore means that he would have been meeting with the people that are coming to clean. He was just, that's why I say he was kind of like your ordinary Uncle Joe that you would meet and get to know. And that's the way he came across. And I think that the condolences are due not only to definitely to the all South Africans who are Catholics, but also to Catholics in the rest of the world. But I think that we should say condolences to the world community because they've lost a champion, they've lost a hero who was concerned about everything that matters for the future of the world, including, therefore, obviously, the sustainability of planet Earth. I mean, can you imagine on the very last day before he goes to his father, before he goes, the one thing he does is to call for peace in the world and to commend that we should all care about the people that are dying in Gaza. And he calls for the hostages to be returned and for the war to come to an end. Now, this is the Pope who every week, I repeat, every week, called the Catholic Church in Gaza to check on how they are doing, how they are coping, how they are surviving. That's how much care he gave. And so that's why his last message, which in my language would say, "Umyolelo," your last word, is almost, it is last will and testament, is that let there be peace in Gaza. It is the same Gaza that he would have been calling every week. After they knew he wouldn't be able to call again. But you know what? We are prisoners of hope and faith. And this is the octave of the Easter season, where this whole week is a week where we're considering seriously the significance of the resurrection of Christ. What a time to choose for God to call this man who has served so faithfully throughout this time. We're grateful for his ministry, and I think the whole world is grateful. As they say in Native American culture, live when you were born, the world you cried and the world laughed. Now, when you die, you must die such that you laugh and the world cries, and the world is crying because this man was a man of the people in the world.
And as you say, he never shied away from speaking about the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza. He did call for the return of the hostages taken by Hamas from Israel, as well as the Palestinian prisoners who are being held in Israeli prison. So he spoke about the politics of the world. He also spoke about Russia, Ukraine, in a war that's now about 3 years old. At a time when, in fact, this is not even a new debate, the church has for years been faced with the debate of how much it should and should not say during times of politically motivated suffering, if I can phrase it in that way. How then, moving forward, should the church navigate? Should it speak out more, for instance, and how can it be more effective to end the suffering?
Let me just say that Pope Francis was one of a kind. The very choice of the name Francis, which is in the footsteps of St. Francis of Assisi, tells you that he made a conscious decision to be a man and pastor of the downtrodden, because that's what Francis was. But also, Francis was committed to nature, the whole created order. And so that's why, so that very commitment tells you where he was going to go. But he then went further than has been anticipated. He then took on very controversial issues and made them come alive in a fresh and new way. They will not be easy to find somebody like that anytime soon. We hope and pray that God can continue to inspire the cardinals in their college to elect somebody that can take this forward. I'll tell you why I'm saying that. Pope Francis was, in a way, similar to to Pope Paul VI, who closed out the Second Vatican Council and passed away himself, having served in bringing those reforms of the Second Vatican Council into being. And I believe that Pope Francis was actually inspired by the papacy of Paul VI. So it tells you that even after 2-3 popes, you can still get the spirit that had moved the church for reformation before. So I believe that there will yet be somebody. It may not be the immediate, but I pray that it be somebody that can continue on this ministry and take the baton and move forward with it. And that the rest of the world will listen carefully and continue to do, whether the Catholic Church does this or not. I think the rest of us have a duty to do what he did, if only to honor what God gave to him in our time.
On the reformist aspects then of his papacy, he was the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, but he is he's a significant figure in the broader Christian history at the moment. To what extent Did that broader community perhaps take its cue from his reformist agenda and taking on, for instance, what you termed, I think earlier, controversial topics that he was not afraid to speak on, be it same-sex marriage, etc.?
Well, one of the things that particularly important, especially in the context of what's happening in Palestine, many Christians are not conscious that if you're thinking about people that go to church every weekend in the Holy Land, you are actually talking about Arabs and Palestinians. That people seem to think that the Palestine-Israel thing is about Muslims and Jews. No, it's about Palestinians as a nation and Israelis as a nation, not region. But and therefore we sort of cancel out the Palestinians that are Christian as if they don't exist. And these are the people that Pope Francis was worried about and talking to on a daily basis. As I say, weekly he would make the calls. Now, there can't be anything more controversial in this day than to say no. The Palestinians are Palestinians as a people, not as a faith, in that they are Muslims, they are Christians. But in the context of that, he decides to have this agreement, this joint document with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, who is a significant leader in the Muslim faith based in Cairo, which is what they did to say, let's commit to a global fraternity, therefore, of siblinghood of all humanity, whether they are Muslims or Christians, whether they are gay or straight, doesn't matter who they are. Their identity, their practices must not define their humanity. And
Okay.
that's what is it's a very controversial thing, but very contextual as far as Muslims and Christians are concerned.
Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, good to talk to you. The retired bishop of the Ethiopian Episcopal Church, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana. Just an update, by the way, we're getting news now from the Vatican, confirmation of the cause of death. They say that Pope Francis died from a stroke and subsequent irreversible heart failure. So there you go, the cause of death for the Pope now made public, a stroke and irreversible heart failure, according to the Vatican.